Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Behind the Stripes podcast. Today I just happen to be in Florida at the National AU Convention, and with me today, I have two of nation's best. I have with me is Don Elsea out of the state of Tennessee. Thanks for being here, Don.
Glad to be
And I
here.
also have Dave Bennetts, who is the head official at the Scholastic Duals tournament out of Montana. Dave, thanks for joining us. As we get started here, I'm going to start with Dave. Dave, I know myself out of Iowa, I've worked Scholastic Duals as an official before, and I've been there several years. Just kind of give a little background about your experience as an official yourself.
Well, I think you have to start with my AAU experience. I started out in the AAU in 1961 as a swimmer and got my first AAU card. AAU carried over throughout my life. When I got involved in high school in wrestling and in college, wrestling became more and more important. As I graduated, I got my first teaching job and coaching job in a small community in eastern Montana, and immediately found myself in the middle of AAU wrestling. Didn't always agree with it, didn't know it, didn't understand it. I'd been a collegiate wrestler, and the challenges were learning about freestyle wrestling in Montana at that point. Um, I moved around the state, had a couple different jobs, ended up in Billings, where one day my wife came home. My son was 5 years old. She said, by the way, I work at the hospital. I'm a nurse, and I signed our son Brian up for wrestling. He's 5. I said, you what? I said, so she said, oh, you don't have to worry about it. Pat said, is all you got to do is take him to practice and drop him off, and it's all wonderful, and they'll just treat him great. I said, okay. She said, oh, I told him you were an official too. I said, well, okay. I became an official in 1976 and became involved with high school program officiating. And by 1978, I worked my first state tournament and was pretty involved in folk style officiating. And said, okay, well, I guess if that's what we got to do, you want him there, but I'm not having anything to do with the program. Well, within 3 weeks, my coach came for my son that was 5 and said, hey, we lost our coach and we need you to help coach. I went, I don't know anything about it. He said, oh, you'll be fine. He said, that's all you got to do is guide little kids. I said, well, I guess I'll get involved because my son's involved and we'll go. So I went to my first couple of practices and we went to our first tournament. And I remembered why I hated AAU wrestling because my little 5-year-old wrestled 9 matches in one day, all day, and ended up not even placing. And he wrestled the last match of the day. I'm going, this is craziness. And parents and coaches were absolutely out of control, yelling and screaming and doing stuff like that. I said, this isn't for me. This isn't for my kids. And Pat said, well, instead of coaching, you're going to be our head official for our team. And you'll go to all this stuff and learn the rules, and then you'll be able to teach. I said, oh, okay, I want to know the rules. So I guess that'll work. So I went there. 2 weeks later, uh, Sprinkle came up to me and said, hey, we're having a tournament, and it's the district tournament, and I want you to come and be our head official. I said, I don't know anything about it. I said, I'm a high school official. He said, oh, just come. He said, anybody gets loud or obnoxious and is mean to these kids that are out there officiating, throw them out. I said, oh, I can do that part. And he said, I'll give you $100. I said, wow, that sounds like a hell of a deal. $100 to stay in there all day? Yeah, that's a good deal for me. So I got involved that way. Gradually from the district level to the divisional level to the state level. Within 10 years, I was the head official of Montana um, AAU wrestling and learned tons and tons about international style wrestling and tons about dealing with people.
All right. And I know you've been involved in all the Scholastic Duals, correct? So how
Since
many years?
1996 was the first
1996.
Scholastic Dual.
All right. And so Don's out of the state of Tennessee. Don, I know you have several years of officiating on your belt, talk about your experience and also tell about your current role at the AAU Scholastic Duals.
Uh, I started refereeing in 1972 when I was in college, and I retired 2 years ago after 50 years of refereeing. I was fortunate. I refereed in 18 different states. I've done over 60 national tournaments, and I've done our high school state tournament 45 times. Um, I got started in AAU when AAU came to Tennessee. I think it was late 90s, 1998, something more like that, and became their head official for the state of Tennessee and got involved doing district and regional and state tournaments. I went to Scholastic Duals. I think 2008 was my first year as a referee. Got involved there, refereed several years, moved up to a position of a captain of a team, and then I became a building manager, and that's the situation is what I hold right now. I'm one of the building managers, and I help Dave pretty much with helping run the Scholastic Duals. As I guess I'd say your right hand man. That's how I got involved.
And I know as far as what I've experienced at Scholastic Duels, having started in 2017, I know you have had a pretty good hand in doing the matrix, as we call it, which is assigning officials to mats. And I know that's changed over the years, and it's been very appreciated how you've adjusted over the years and taking officials. And I know today we just happen to be talking about that. Along with adjustments, we got to talk about girls and adding girls into Scholastic Duels. Don, let's start with you. How do you feel adding girls to our Scholastic Duel events has kind of changed not only the dynamics of what we see on the mat, but also maybe just like the maybe additional challenges that are brought your way?
Adding the girls is, I think, is probably one of the best things we did. The one thing I noticed about the girls wrestlers is that they really go after it. You really don't have to worry about calling stalling or anything like that because they just really get after it. They wrestle hard, and at the end of the match, they get to hug each other. But it is also where our numbers are growing. The numbers in girls wrestling across the country is growing. It's probably the biggest growth we have is in girls wrestling. Um, it also has opened up the doors too that we have now brought in several female officials. I think we had what? How many we have last year?
Six.
Six.
Six sounds right.
So that's opened the doors for them. They also not just do the girls, and with the girls wrestling, we don't just have girls officials doing girls. We have the guys call the girls matches, and the girls also call the guys matches. So it's they're not limited just to one gender or not. So that's to me, it's been exciting having them.
I just know coming from Iowa, being involved in our Iowa girls board, one of the things that I just love seeing is our girls light up when they see some of our female officials and they know them by name and they run up and they give them a hug. And it's been really nice to see. Dave, as the director of Scholastic Duels, anything else you'd like to add to what Don mentioned about just the addition of female wrestlers and female referees?
Well, I think Don hit it on the head. Is that women's wrestling is the fastest growing sport in the United States. It's growing in leaps and bounds, and every state now has its own state tournament, high school, and most of them have qualifying events and ongoing wrestling for girls at every level. It was a big switch. Girls used to wrestle boys, and it was a big fight about whether, you want your 10-year-old out there wrestling a boy or not, and on we went. And suddenly, girls had their own place, and then we had girl officials, and we've had some excellent women officials who've come through our system. We've got some from all over the country. I mean, we have girls officials from not only Montana, but we have them from Tennessee. We have them from Iowa. We have them from Colorado, Missouri, Kansas, Texas, Florida. I mean, there's a bunch of women out there who really embrace this sport.
Yeah, and it's just been great to see. I have a daughter that wrestles, and it's just neat to see my daughter on the mat, and then I see her working with some of the officials that I get to work with, and I feel pretty fortunate where we're at. So before I go on to my next question, I guess, is there a memorable moment from state or from national duels that either one of you can recollect? Anyone that kind of stands out either as an official, Don, or any moments that you can think of as a director that really kind of stand out, kind of put you on the spot. I know I didn't script this question in, but I just, with all of our years of experience of Scholastic Duals, any special moment that stands out?
Sure.
I think for me, the most successful thing was watch young officials come through our system, go through our evaluating process, go through our system, and then suddenly get that opportunity to work the NC2A finals. And we've had 4 or 5 of those guys who just started out basically loving the sport, loving officiating, um, invested for all the right reasons, and they get their opportunities. And I think for me, personal success, you watch people have personal success in the sport. That's really what's important. And I think that's what wrestling teaches you is that you're only dependent on yourself and you get out what you put in.
I think wrestling teaches you that, and I think AAU really just embodies that whole family concept too. When I know, and Don, you and I talked about connections. Like I know I get off the mat in Iowa, and I can call you, I can call friends in tennis, other states, and we can just sit there and talk shop all the time. And it's really a fraternity of officials, family, if you will, and that's what I really think AAU is really about. So.
That's the word you said, family. That's what I've taken away from it is it's the friendships that I've built and the people that become family. Like you say, we can pick up the phone, call anybody, any time of day, ask them a question about rules or how they're doing, or it's just the closeness that you see in this sport. I think you don't see in any other sport. We always talk about at a home, you go to during a session of a tournament, you go to the hospitality room, you'll see coaches and referees sitting together discussing stuff. I don't know of any other sport that you see that in. And that's that family atmosphere that it's a brotherhood. Wrestling makes it a brotherhood, I
Yeah,
think.
I totally agree. So now let's move forward and let's talk about both of you are pretty embedded into our evaluation process. Maybe tell our listeners like what a wrestling official needs to do to be selected to work at Scholastic Duals. We'll start out with Don on this one. As an evaluator yourself out of Tennessee, and I know you travel the country because I've seen you at other states as well. What are you looking for? And I know earlier today you kind of told me some look fors, but just kind of voice to our listeners what you're looking for.
Well, you go to a national tournament, most everybody the officials are good or they wouldn't be there. So they know the rules or they wouldn't be there. What I look forward to is are they consistent in their calls? Positioning on the mat? Are they chasing the action or are they in the right position to make the right call? Are they too close to the wrestlers? Which I think that's one thing we see in a lot of new officials is they're just way, way too close to the action. So I look for consistency, the mechanics. Mechanics really starts where you start separating people. Do they have good mechanics? Do they just use the correct signals or do they make up signals? Those are things I think separate your top officials is your mechanics and position on the mat. Right off the top of my head.
All right, Dave, and anything you want to add to that, or is there anything outside of the mat space that you're looking for as well?
I think that it's really, really important for officials to display a feeling of impartiality. And remember, it's not about me as an official, it's about the kids that are wrestling on the mat. It's about them. They're the show, not you. And we need to protect that integrity of the sport and allow kids to make a wrestling decision about who the better man is that particular 6 minute period. It's not up to the referee to be involved in other than arbitrating, putting up the score, being impartial, and trying to control the activity of not only the wrestlers, but of the coaches, the table workers, the fans, everyone involved, that there is a person out there with integrity who really understands that it's about wrestling and the kids and not about me.
And I go along with that. And Don, anything else you want to add there?
Yes, he said something very. It's not about the official. We have a saying, and we tell all our officials in a lot of our tournaments, no one paid to see you referee today.
Yeah.
They didn't. No one's here to pay to see you referee. It's not about you. It's about the kids. It's about the wrestlers on the mat. The other thing I looked at when I'm evaluating is I try to talk to officials that come off the mat and throughout the day, and then the next day, if I've talked to them about something, I say, do they make a change? Do they correct what we talked about, or are they still doing the same thing that I felt should have been corrected? That's one thing I look. Do they make the changes, and what will make them a better official?
I think in the coaching world, we always call it, are you coachable? Are you willing to adjust? Are you
Yeah.
willing to listen? Are you willing to accept feedback? Do you request feedback? Those are things that I think mean everything. So now, for those that don't know, Scholastic Duals isn't something that's just put together in a weekend. I mean, these guys travel the country year round, and you're looking at a lot of moving parts, and they're evaluating people all over the state or all over the country, and we usually have a worker list of about 60 officials. So you got a lot of people, a lot of states represented, and there's a lot of evaluations that go into our selection process. So as we get going here, now let's talk about, okay, so as we get to Scholastic Duals, those words of advice that you talk to your coaches. I know, Dave, you always lead a pretty solid, but it's pretty swift and quick coaches meeting. So talk about what you really stress in that coaches meeting.
Well, once again, I think we emphasize that you're here to referee wrestling and to be impartial, that the show is about the kids, not about you, and that you enjoy the sport, that you like what you're doing out there, and that you are comfortable knowing the rules, comfortable in interacting with people, and understand that you're going to make 60 to 80 judgment calls. Some are very simple, some are very complex, some are going to be challenged. Some people are going to challenge you in an aggressive manner. Some are going to work you a different way. It's always learning to deal with people and understand. So we set up our 60 officials, which is where we're at today, on approximately 30 mats. And we set it up so that they're learning from experienced officials. You both have been captains. Basically, we put our younger officials with you so that you can begin the process of guiding. When they're evaluated, the first thing that they do is go to a qualifying tournament. There are 9 qualifying tournaments across the state that you must qualify out of to work the Scholastic Duals. At those, you're evaluated first. Then you're ranked with all the officials there. Then you are recommended. And then you are accepted to work the tournament. So there are a process to just getting to that level of experience. As Don said, we bring in some of the best officials in the country, some of the best young officials, because right now they're not fighting with their ego. They just want to get better.
Yep. And Don, one of the things that I know, if coaches do have an issue, talk about that process they go through. If a coach is unhappy, we'll say, about a call, I know as a building manager, talk about how they go through and what we do to try to not only appease the wrestlers, but appease the coaches as well in that situation.
Normally we have like 4 building managers throughout the building, and sometimes it might be 2 per session. And the coaches are told that if they have a disagreement with the official on the mat, to call a building manager. As a building manager, we'll come by and discuss the situation with the coach. Now, we're not going to change the call, but we'll tell the coach a lot of times, we'll sit here and watch and evaluate this official. We're not going to take that official off the mat. If you're still unhappy with him at the end of the duel, then we'll say that you do not have that official again. But we'll sit here and watch him to see if it's value what you're complaining about. But and then we also will talk with the official about the call, but we don't change his calls.
Right. I think it's also important to recognize that we really try to not have our officials work their home state. The last thing you want is to an Iowa team wrestling a team from Georgia and an Iowa official out there, that it's hard to separate impartiality. And so it's very important that we try to keep that integrity from the beginning of the match and keep it clean, and important that we have quality officials. I always tell coaches in our meeting is that, hey, this might be the worst official you've ever seen in your life. And I'll guarantee you for your match that day, he may have been that. But I'm going to tell you a little secret. If you walk around and you watch the other 59 officials, you'll find we have very, very good officials. And this guy may not fit into your cup of tea, but the realities are there's a reason he's here, and he's here to get better. And that's our job, is to teach him.
And I think one of the things that I like that you guys have told coaches before is they're in a role of being educators. All right, because AAU is about teaching people how to handle adversity, how to handle things the right way. And I think, we've reiterated that to coaches before, just about how they handle disagreements, go through the proper chain, talk to a building manager, talk about it in a rational sort of way, and you'll usually get more solutions to your problems. So, all right. So as we finish up here, any parting words of advice to any future officials, Don? We'll start with you. With your 50 years of experience, any large pieces of advice you'd like to give to future officials?
Biggest thing I have for new officials is don't get discouraged. You know, if we can get officials out to keep him for 3 or 4 years, pretty much we've got him. But so many times they get discouraged. Don't just get discouraged. Feel free to contact other people and ask for advice. Be coachable. That's very important. Be coachable. It's all about mat time. The more time you spend on the mat, the better you're going to get. Just like wrestling, you get better by the amount of time you spend on the mat. Be a better official, you have to get on that mat, and you have to be willing to work.
Absolutely. How about you, Dave?
I would say to listen and to learn and understand that nobody is perfect, that you will make mistakes, but the important thing is to learn from your mistakes and to listen and be clear and understand what's being said to you and why is so much more important than winning the argument. So listen, be a part, grow.
And I think owning it, right? We've talked about that before. Like, if you make a mistake, everyone makes a mistake, own it, admit you made a mistake, don't be bigger than the moment, and just do your best.
Yeah.
Right. So I appreciate you guys' time. Again, Dave Bennetts from Montana, Don Elsea from Tennessee, two great minds of wrestling that have probably forgotten more about wrestling than I'll ever know. And thank you guys for your time today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Mark.